If you're listening to this, you likely already identify as a developer, an engineer, maybe just a great coder. But there's this deeper thing we all seem to want, to be seen as a professional. You want that respect, right? The deference, the autonomy that seems to come with the title. It's like a badge of honor.
Yeah, definitely.
But here's the tough question. The one our source material really pushes us on today. Is being a professional just, a status you claim? Or is it actually this heavy, maybe even kind of painful burden, a burden of relentless responsibility and accountability you have to earn and carry like every single day?
That difference, claiming it versus carrying the burden, that's exactly where this deep dive kicks off. We're looking at sources that define professionalism specifically for us, for software developers.
Right.
And it moves way past the usual stuff, like what languages you know. It gets into the almost philosophical core of what it means to be responsible for code.
Philosophical, yeah. It sets a really high bar.
It does. It focuses not just on code that works, once, but on accountability, on internalizing ethics, and adopting practices that make sure the whole system lasts, that it has integrity.
And what jumped out at me right away was how serious they are about the ethical side. I mean, they're pulling ideas from other fields, like medicine. They mentioned the Hippocratic Oath.
Exactly. That first do no harm principle.
Yeah. And applying that to writing software.
Yeah.
It's a strong stance. It draws this really sharp line, almost brutal sometimes, between what they call a professional and a non-professional.
So our mission today really is to give you a shortcut to understanding those core ideas. We want to pull out the principles that lift software development from just being a job into a real high-stakes profession.
Okay.
We'll cover everything from the psychological cost of just one small error to the pretty demanding personal investment needed just to stay relevant. It's all designed to show you what it takes to stop being just a coder, maybe, and start being an engineer who takes responsibility.
Okay, let's unpack that loaded term then.
Yeah.
Starting with the idea that seems to underpin everything else. Accountability. Because if you want that badge of honor, you've got to be ready for the weight that comes with it, the responsibility.
Right. We have to start with this idea that professionalism is, well, it's got two sides. You can't separate the pride you take in your work from the responsibility you have for it.
Pride and responsibility.
Exactly. You can't genuinely feel proud of the good results if you're not also ready to be held accountable when things go wrong. They have to go hand in hand.
And this is where the sources make that really critical, almost high-stakes distinction between, the two mindsets you see on dev teams.
Yeah.
The definition of a non-professional, as they put it, it's pretty simple. They make a mistake, and they kind of leave it to someone else, the employer, maybe QA, maybe even the customer, to clean it up.
Right. They see the error as, external. It's not their mess.
Whereas the professional, they operate from a place of total ownership.
Total ownership. When a professional messes up, they feel compelled morally, ethically, practically to clean it up themselves. They internalize that mistake. They see all the consequences way beyond just the few lines of code they wrote.
To make this really concrete, less abstract, the sources give us this thought experiment. It's pretty intense. They call it the $10,000 bug test.
Yeah, it's designed to really check how deep your personal ownership goes. Imagine you write some code, maybe a module, and because you missed something, a simple bug gets into production.
Okay.
It needs fixing right away, and fixing it, dealing with the fallout, ends up costing the company $10,000. Maybe that's lost confidence. Maybe it's the actual cost of the recovery effort. Maybe, fines because data was lost.
So the non-professional hears that number, $10,000. What do?
They basically shrug, mentally file it under stuff happens.
Right. Or maybe QA should have caught that.
Exactly. Or the spec was unclear. They just move on to the next task, totally insulated from that financial hit.
But the professional, according to this definition,
Yeah.
they feel that $10K burden. They feel it so much.
So much that they would, metaphorically speaking, maybe even literally in some ideal world, write the company a check for $10,000.
Wow.
It's not about actually paying the money. It's about feeling the pain of that error, internalizing it.
That changes everything, that feeling, that ownership.
Yeah.
If you feel the cost, you're going to act differently beforehand, right?
Totally.
Let's expand on that cost, though, because $10,000, honestly, often feels like the smallest part of the damage. What else does the professional internalize?
That's a great point. The professional sees the ripple effects first, yeah. Reputational damage. If a bug hits a key client, forget $10,000. You've lost future business, credibility. That could be millions.
Hmm.
Second, there's the damage to the team's morale. If the system's always breaking because of simple mistakes, the whole team starts to lose confidence. They get scared to make changes.
So the professional knows they've hurt their teammates' ability to work effectively, their psychological safety.
Exactly. And third, you mentioned the cost beyond the $10.
Yeah.
There's the opportunity cost.
Right. If the team spends 3 days fixing your bug.
That's 3 days they weren't building the next feature, the feature that might have brought in $100,000.
Ouch.
Precisely. So the professional gets it. Their mistake didn't just cost 10 grand, it cost the company momentum, future earnings. When you adopt that mindset that this $10,000 pain is mine, well, your whole approach to code reviews, to testing, even to deadlines, it just fundamentally shifts.
So this isn't just theory for you listening. It's like the baseline context. If you don't feel the weight of that metaphorical check.
You haven't really adopted the professional standard they're talking about, not yet.
Okay, so if we agree on that baseline cost, that financial and psychological weight of a mistake, the next logical step seems to be adopting some kind of ethical framework, something designed to stop that cost from happening in the first place.
Exactly. That moves us from just accountability after the fact to thinking about a developer's oath.
Right. If the mistakes are that costly, we need principles to guide us. We should probably look at established professions, right?
Like medicine.
Like medicine. The source strongly pushes for drawing inspiration from the Hippocratic Oath. The core idea there is your first responsibility, your first goal as a professional software developer has to be using your power for good.
And the power we have is pretty significant, imposing complex order on machines.
It is. And so do no harm. When you translate that to software, it means harm in two main ways.
Okay, what are they?
First, the obvious one. Do no harm to the function. Don't ship bugs that break what the software is supposed to do.
Makes sense.
Second, and this one's often more subtle, but maybe even more important long-term, do no harm to the structure.
Meaning?
Meaning don't compromise the internal design, the architecture, the cleanliness of the code, because doing that harms its future. It makes it hard to change, hard to maintain. Got it. So the goal, the audacious goal maybe, for the professional is don't create bugs and don't mess up the structure.
That's the ideal, yes.
Okay, all right. Here's where I have to jump in with what I know listeners are thinking. That immediate reaction, the perfection objection. You know, wait a minute, that's impossible. Software is way too complex. You can't create it without bugs. It's almost like a cultural belief in our field.
Yeah.
How do we square that professional oath with the reality of human error and complexity?
It's a totally valid challenge, and the material tackles it head on. It kind of turns the complexity argument around on us.
How so?
Yes, writing perfect software is, well, virtually impossible. We're human, the systems are complex, but look at other professions again. Medicine, the human body, that's a system orders of magnitude more complex than any software we write.
True.
Yet doctors still take an oath to do no harm. Complexity doesn't just let you off the hook. It doesn't absolve the professional developer of responsibility for what they produce.
Okay, so if perfection isn't required, you still have to be accountable for the imperfections. If you can't write perfect software, what is the required response when things go wrong?
It's basically twofold. First, right after it happens, you must be accountable for the errors, even though you know errors are basically inevitable.
Yeah. What does that look like?
It starts with a genuine apology to the customer, the team, whoever felt the impact, acknowledging the cost you caused. But, and this is critical, that apology is necessary, but it's nowhere near enough.
Okay.
You can't just keep making the same mistakes and saying sorry. That's not professional.
So the second part is about improvement, like that asymptotic goal you mentioned.
Exactly. As you grow as a professional, your error rate, the frequency and severity of your mistakes, it has to consciously, deliberately decrease. You have to drive it down towards that asymptote of zero.
It'll never hit zero.
It'll never hit zero. But the professional knows it's their profound responsibility to keep refining their process, their practices, their discipline, to get as close as humanly possible. The oath isn't about being superhuman. It's about perfecting the process of creating software.
That focus on process failure.
Yeah.
It really comes alive in that anecdote from 1979 that the sources provide.
Huh.
It's a powerful story about what happens when you prioritize, like, saving face over actual professional responsibility.
Yeah, this specific story is really foundational in the material. It's about an engineer working back in 1979, I think it was, for Teradyne, a company making test equipment.
Okay.
And this person was the designated responsible engineer for the software running a pretty complex system. It measured the quality of telephone lines.
Telephone lines. So this is critical infrastructure stuff.
Absolutely mission critical. Think about it. The software controlled a central mini computer. That computer talked over dial-up lines. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
Barely. Right. It talked to dozens of smaller satellite microcomputers out in the field. These micros controlled the actual hardware doing electrical tests on phone lines. And the users. Service managers at major phone companies, people responsible for huge territories, maybe 100,000 phone lines or more.
Wow.
And crucially, the data wasn't just for fixing problems, it actually helped regulate the rates the phone companies could charge. So this code had direct impact on public utility commissions, millions of customers. Big deal.
High stakes is right.
Yeah.
So what was the core function? The daily grind of this system?
The key was something called the nightly routine. It was automated. Every night, the central computer would tell all the little microcomputers, okay, test every single phone line you're connected to.
Okay.
So when the managers came in the next morning, they expected this fresh report. Concise, showing all the lines with problems. This let them send out repair crews before customers even knew there was an issue. It was proactive maintenance. That nightly report basically ran the whole service department.
So I'm guessing the mistake hit that nightly report directly. What happened?
You got it. The developer, our responsible engineer, was working on a new release. Supposed to fix a few minor known bugs, add one new feature that was apparently highly requested.
Standard stuff.
Standard stuff. But they'd promised management a hardship date. And as that date got closer, the pressure mounted. They finished the new feature, fixed the bugs, but the nightly routine, which took several hours to run, even in the lab, it hadn't been fully tested with all the new code integrated. The developer knew this was a risk, but they were feeling the pressure, worried about missing the date, worried about their reputation, so they decided to ship it anyway.
They rushed it.
Rushed it. The motivation, as the source states very clearly, was self-serving. It was about saving face, not about the customer, not even really about the employer's best interest.
And a call came. Soon after.
Yeah. 2 days later, call comes in from a field service manager, a guy named Tom. The nightly routines were failing across the board. No reports. Because the system was supposed to be proactive, customers were now calling in with complaints that should have been caught. Losing that report was catastrophic for Tom and his team. Schedules wrecked, managers furious, and the new feature was useless because the core function was broken.
And the engineer back in the lab must have known immediately what it was.
Oh, yeah. Loaded the new software, ran the nightly routine. Hours later, crash. Took days of frantic debugging to find the bug, described as pretty obscure. And all this time, Tom, the field manager, is getting absolutely hammered by his bosses. He's calling the developer constantly, furious, demanding a fix.
That's the classic death spiral, isn't it? Rush something to avoid short-term pain, like missing a deadline.
And you end up causing massive, high-stakes, long-term pain, a full-blown customer crisis.
Yeah.
And that was the engineer's big takeaway looking back. That initial decision shipping without testing that critical routine was fundamentally an irresponsible act. If they had just owned up earlier, told management, look, I need one more day, the most critical part isn't fully tested yet.
There would have been disappointment, maybe.
Yeah, temporary disappointment, but no crisis, no data loss, no damage to Tom's reputation or the company's. That moment of fear, putting their own reputation ahead of the system's integrity, ahead of the customer, that was the violation of the oath. The ethical failure was the willingness to gamble.
That's a really powerful story. Professionalism means having the guts to take responsibility before the crisis hits, even if it means bad news short term. And that ethical foundation, that do no harm idea, it leads straight into the technical practices you need to avoid that kind of gamble.
Exactly. If the ethics say, first, do no harm, then the technical response can't be optional. It has to be mandatory quality control, built in, owned by the developer. And this leads to a pretty radical demand in the source material. When you release software to QA as a professional, you must expect QA to find 0 problems that you didn't already know about.
0 new problems. That's a different way of thinking about QA. It means developers need to not just fix bugs, but really proactively prevent them and prove they've prevented them.
Precisely. You should expect QA to find nothing surprising, because you, the professional, have already done the work. You've verified, you've validated your code thoroughly enough that you know exactly what might still be shaky, if anything, and what's definitely working. You're handing it over for confirmation, not exploration.
And the sources are pretty harsh about using QA as like a safety net or bug catchers.
Oh, yeah. It's called out as irresponsible, high-cost behavior, that mindset of, I'll just code it up and let QA find the problems.
No.
It's seen as disastrous.
Why? What are the costs?
Well, it's expensive, right? QA time isn't free. It damages the company because it makes schedules totally unpredictable. And maybe most importantly, it kills the development team's confidence. It creates this cycle where developers feel like it's okay to produce shaky work because, hey, QA will catch it. It completely undermines that do no harm rule.
So if you knowingly hand over code you suspect is buggy,
Yeah.
you're basically acting unprofessionally. You're damaging the company's economics.
That's the argument.
And the solution, circling back to that $10,000 responsibility, is simple but hard. You have to know it works. You have to test it thoroughly.
But then you hit the wall, right? Time. Manual testing takes ages. Deadlines are real. How does the professional actually do this?
Yeah.
The answer given is unequivocal. Automation. Automated testing isn't presented as a nice-to-have or a best practice. It's framed as a non-negotiable technical pillar of professionalism.
And the demand is intense. They say every single line of code you write should be tested.
Yeah. Now, the sources do clarify it's not about hitting some dogmatic, literal 100% code coverage metric. That's often impossible or impractical. It's an asymptote.
Okay.
But it's a mindset. If you expect a line of code to actually run in the system, you need to be confident that what it does is correct. And the only practical way to get that confidence, reliably and quickly, is through automated tests. Tests that run fast, run often.
Can you give an example? Like, what does this look like in a real project, that level of commitment?
Sure. The material points to examples maybe like open source projects known for discipline. It mentions one called Fertness. At the time they looked at it, it had something like 60,000 lines of code.
Okay.
And it had over 2,000 unit tests, which gave it code coverage easily over 90%. That density of automated testing, that's what gives developers the confidence, the safety net they need to meet that professional standard.
And the best way to write code you can test easily is often to write the test first.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to TDD.
Right. Test-driven development. It's presented here not just as, a coding technique, but as a core discipline that directly supports that ethical mandate of do no harm.
How so?
Because writing the test first forces you to think about the design differently. You have to make the code testable. And guess what? Testable code is almost always better code. It's less coupled. It's usually broken into smaller pieces. It's cleaner.
So TDD helps with the structure, too, not just the function.
Absolutely. If you find it hard to write a test for a piece of code, that's a huge red flag. It means the structure is probably flawed. TDD makes you confront that structural weakness immediately, which directly supports the do no harm to structure rule.
Okay, let's focus on that structural harm now, because this feels like a place where maybe less experienced developers often stumble. They deliver the feature, it works, but they leave behind this tangled mess of code. Brittle, hard to change.
And that compromise on structure, the source calls it the fool's errand. Delivering function by sacrificing structure isn't seen as a pragmatic trade-off. It's viewed as setting up an economic collapse down the line.
Why economic collapse? That sounds dramatic.
Because the entire value proposition of software, pretty much across the industry, rests on one fundamental assumption. Software is supposed to be easy to change. Software.
Right.
Flexible. If your shortcuts, your structural compromises, maybe tight coupling, maybe hidden dependencies, maybe tons of global state, if they make the code hard to change, you've violated that core assumption. You're literally undermining the economics of your project, your company, maybe even the industry's reputation.
We've all seen those projects, right? Where making one tiny change takes weeks, because touching anything breaks 3 other things unexpectedly.
Exactly. And what's the typical management response? Throw more people at it, which just makes the tangled structure worse faster.
So the professional knows structure is king or queen, paramount. How do you ensure software stays easy to change?
The proof is in the pudding. If you want it to be flexible, you have to flex it. Constantly. You need to adopt this mindset of continuous, almost merciless improvement of the structure.
This sounds like the Boy Scout rule idea.
That's exactly it. Often called the Boy Scout rule. Always leave the campsite cleaner than you found it. In code terms. Always check in a module cleaner than when you checked it out.
So every time you touch a file.
Every single time. You're in there fixing a bug, adding a small feature, take an extra 5 minutes, rename a confusing variable, break a long function into two smaller ones, remove a misleading comment, make some small random act of kindness towards the code structure. It's continuous opportunistic refactoring.
Okay, but that sounds scary to a lot of teams, especially in high-pressure places. The idea of constantly changing code that technically works, people worry they'll break something.
And that fear is a direct symptom of a lack of professionalism, according to this view. Why are they scared? Because they think they will break it. And why do they think they'll break it?
Because they don't have the tests.
Exactly. Because they don't have that comprehensive suite of automated tests. The connection is crystal clear. It's vital. The only way to kill that fear, the fear that prevents you from keeping the structure clean, is to have tests that cover damn near everything and run in seconds. That's what lets the professional change the code all the time without fear.
So the ability to practice the Boy Scout rule, which is like an ethical duty to maintain structure, it completely depends on the technical discipline of automated testing.
100%. The confidence you get from those tests is what allows you to be, as the source puts it, almost maddeningly casual about making those small, continuous structural improvements.
And that confidence is the mark of technical professionalism. It lets you shape the software like clay over time, making sure it stays flexible, stays maintainable, and ultimately stays economically viable. Okay, so we've got the ethical foundation, that deep accountability, and the technical foundation, rigorous testing, protecting structure. Now we need to talk about the personal commitment. The sheer effort required to stay professional in a field that changes so damn fast.
Yeah, and the material kicks this section off with a truth bomb that, let's be honest, a lot of developers don't want to hear.
Yeah, which is?
Your career is your responsibility. Full stop. Period. It is not your employer's job to keep you marketable. It's not their job to make sure you're trained, relevant, up to date.
So if my company pays for training or buys tech books or sends me to a conference,
They're doing you a favor. A nice favor, maybe a smart investment on their part. But it's not them fulfilling some obligation they have to you.
and if they don't provide those things,
The professional finds a way to do it themselves. Believing that your career growth is someone else's problem is seen as a fundamental failure of professional ownership. You own your value. You have to maintain it.
this leads us straight into what might be the most provocative proposal in the whole source,
Yeah.
the 60-hour work week plan.
Yeah, this one definitely gets people's attention. The idea is this. A professional recognizes that the standard 40-hour week, in the U.S. context anyway, that's for solving the employer's immediate problems. Therefore, the professional should plan on dedicating an additional 20 hours per week specifically to their own career development.
Whoa, hold on. 60 hours. Before we go further, I have to push back here. That sounds like a guaranteed recipe for burnout. What about work-life balance? Family? Sanity? Is this seriously saying sacrifice your personal life and work 60 hours for your boss, unpaid?
That's the immediate reaction, right? And it's a really crucial distinction to make. The source is very clear. These extra 20 hours are not about working more for your employer for free. Absolutely not.
Okay, so what are they for?
They are dedicated exclusively to activities that enhance your career. Reading technical books or blogs, practicing coding exercises, learning a new framework on your own time, attending meetups, working on a side project. It's an investment in yourself, not unpaid overtime for the boss.
So if I spend, say, an hour each morning before work studying a new design pattern, or I read a tech book on my lunch break, that counts towards the 20.
Absolutely. That's exactly the idea. It's flexibly integrated. It could be listening to technical podcasts during your commute. It could be spending a Saturday morning diving into a new database technology. The 40 hours are for the employer's problems. The 20 hours are for your future marketability and skill.
Okay, that reframing helps, but still, 20 extra hours of brain work.
Yeah.
How does that avoid burnout? It still sounds draining.
The argument made in the source is that it avoids burnout because these 20 hours are ideally spent pursuing your passion. Why did most of us get into this field? Because we love solving problems, we love learning, we love the craft of building things with code.
True for many, yeah.
So these 20 hours are about feeding that passion, getting sharper, more capable, more engaged with the intellectual side of what we do. That self-investment, the argument goes, actually increases your enthusiasm and competence. It makes you more valuable, deepens your engagement, which is pretty much the opposite of burnout.
Okay. It's a demanding perspective, but
Right.
I see the logic. And this commitment, this 20 hours, it directly fuels what the sources call the intellectual mandate.
Which is that a professional must actually know a significant chunk of the discipline, the stuff that's evolved over, what, 50 plus years now?
Right, and we have to fight that common idea that because tech moves so fast, everything old is irrelevant.
Exactly. That's a huge fallacy. Developers chase the shiny new framework without understanding the fundamental principles underneath it, principles that were often figured out decades ago. It's like that Santayana quote, right? Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Yeah. You see teams solving problems today that were, like, solved by structured design in the 70s.
Precisely.
So what specific knowledge are we talking about?
Yeah.
The sources provide a pretty daunting checklist. It spans decades.
It is robust, no doubt. It says a professional should be really conversant with things like all 24 design patterns from the Gang of Four book, essential. You need to know the solid principles inside and out. Component principles, too.
Yeah.
You should have practical understanding of different development methodologies, XP, Scrum, Lean, Kanban, yeah. But also the older ones like waterfall, structured analysis, structured design. Know their strengths, weaknesses, when to apply them.
And specific disciplines, too, right? Like TDD we mentioned.
Definitely. Disciplines like TDD, object-oriented design, structured programming concepts, continuous integration, pair programming. You need to know how to do these things.
And then there's the artifacts.
Yeah.
The diagrams and things.
Yes. The professional should recognize and understand things like UML diagrams, data flow diagrams, DFDs, structure charts, Petri nets, state transition diagrams. These aren't just historical curiosities. They are tools for thinking rigorously about software structure, regardless of what language you're using today.
To make this really concrete for listeners, maybe someone thinking about how to use those 20 hours. The sources threw out a list of specific, maybe even slightly obscure jargon terms. The idea being if you don't know these, you've got a knowledge gap.
Yeah, it's a good self-test.
Let's hit a couple. For example, what on earth is tramp data?
Yeah, tramp data. That's a great example from old school structured design that's still super relevant. Tramp data is basically data that gets passed into a function or a method,
Okay.
but it's only actually used by maybe one tiny part of that function way down inside. Or maybe it just gets passed through to another function call. It's tramp because it's just passing through. It doesn't really belong there.
And why should I care about that today?
Because it's a classic smell. It signals weak cohesion in that function. It tells you the function is probably doing too much, or it's coupled in weird ways. Seeing tramp data should make a professional think, maybe this function needs to be split up into smaller, more focused pieces. It's about structural cleanliness. Knowing the term helps you spot the problem.
Got it. Okay, another one. Nassy-Schneiderman chart. That sounds really historical.
It is. Nassy-Schneiderman chart, or sometimes called a structogram, developed way back in the 70s. It's basically a graphical way to represent program logic like a flowchart. But the key thing is, its structure visually enforces the rules of structured programming. You literally cannot draw a go-to statement or spaghetti logic using its boxes. It forces you to think in terms of sequence selection, isvalse, and iteration loops. Understanding why it existed helps you appreciate the historical fight for structured, understandable code.
Interesting. Okay, one more from the list. Parnas table. Sounds very specific.
David Parnas. Huge figure in software design, modularity, information hiding back in the 70s and 80s. A Parnas table was essentially a formal way to document a system's structure. It showed which modules knew about or depended on which internal secrets or resources of other modules.
Like an early form of interface definition.
Kind of. It was all about maximizing information, hiding, making sure modules only knew the absolute minimum necessary about others. Understanding the thinking behind Parnas tables helps you grasp coupling and cohesion at a really fundamental theoretical level. And that informs the structural decisions you make every day, even in modern OO languages.
Okay, that frames the list well. It's not about passing a trivia test tomorrow. It's a roadmap for that 20 hours of personal investment. And part of that investment has to be practice, right? Not just reading.
Absolutely. Continuous learning needs continuous practice. Think about musicians practicing scales or athletes running drills. They don't just perform, they train. Developers need the same thing. Your day job is the performance. You need dedicated time for practice drills.
And the technique recommended for this is the kata.
Yes, coding katas. These are simple, usually well-defined programming problems. Things like scoring a game of bowling or generating prime factors.
Problems you already know how to solve, basically.
Exactly. The point isn't figuring out the solution. The point is to practice the execution, to train your fingers and your brain to implement the solution using very specific, refined techniques.
Like maybe doing the bowling game kata, strictly using PDD, or focusing on specific refactoring moves while doing the prime factors kata.
Precisely. It's about building muscle memory, getting your keyboard shortcuts down cold, reinforcing the discipline of writing clean, structured code in a low-pressure environment. The recommendation is to do them regularly, maybe daily, maybe a few times a week, like a 10-minute warm-up before you start coding for work or a cool down before you log off. It keeps your skills sharp. Okay, so we've got the internal stuff covered, the ethics, the technical skills, the personal commitment to learning and practice. But the professional doesn't live in a vacuum, right? We have to turn outwards now. Responsibilities to the team, to the business.
Right. The source says self-investment is primary, but the second best way to learn, collaboration.
Collaboration is huge. Professional developers, according to this, should actively seek out opportunities to work together, programming together, designing together, planning together.
It's not just about getting work done faster.
No, it's more than that. It acts like a continuous informal peer review. It helps catch misunderstandings early, ensures better quality, better structural integrity because you have multiple eyes on it, multiple minds challenging assumptions.
And a big part of that outward responsibility, especially for more senior folks, is mentoring.
Yeah, mentoring is framed as a core professional duty, and interestingly, also as maybe the best way to solidify your own knowledge.
How so?
Because nothing forces you to understand something deeply, like having to explain it clearly to someone else. You have to really grasp the facts, the principles, the values to communicate them effectively.
Makes sense.
So professionals have a responsibility to mentor junior developers. They don't just let them struggle alone, potentially writing fragile code or learning bad habits. Teaching is about passing on those ethical and technical standards. It's deeply tied to responsibility.
Beyond the immediate team, there's also a responsibility to the problem you're solving, which means you have to know your domain.
This one is so often overlooked, isn't it? If you're building software for, say, the accounting industry, you need to understand the basics of accounting, double entry bookkeeping, debits, credits.
Or if it's for travel, you need to know about GDS systems, fares, ticketing rules.
Exactly. You don't need to be the world's foremost expert in that domain, but you do need to do your homework, due diligence.
So that means when you start on a new project, a professional should be actively reading books about that industry, talking to actual users and customers, trying to grasp the fundamentals of their business.
Yes. The goal is to get beyond just blindly coding whatever is written in the spec. The source actually calls that one of the worst kinds of unprofessional behavior, just executing a requirements doc without understanding the why behind it.
Because you might implement something that technically meets the spec, but makes no sense in the real world.
Precisely. You're supposed to be an expert consultant in software. How can you consult effectively if you don't understand the client's world well enough to spot inconsistencies or ask clarifying questions or even challenge a requirement that seems wrong based on your domain knowledge? The professional needs to be able to say, hang on, this requirement seems to violate a basic principle of logistics or whatever that domain is.
That requires a real sense of partnership then, which leads to the idea of identifying with your employer or customer.
Absolutely. The professional has to mentally step into the customer's shoes, your employer's problems. They're not just tasks assigned to you. They become your problems to solve.
So you avoid that common us versus them attitude, the developers versus management or developers versus marketing.
Exactly. That's seen as a lazy trap. The professional works with the business, making sure the features being built truly address the underlying need, even if that means pushing back sometimes on technically easy but strategically dumb requests.
Okay, we've covered a massive amount of responsibility here. Ethical, technical, personal, collaborative, domain-specific. It sounds exhausting. Which brings us to the final piece. The mindset needed to actually carry all this weight, humility.
Yeah, it seems like a paradox at first, right? Because programming itself is, in a way, an act of supreme arrogance.
How so? Arrogance.
Well, think about it. We're telling this incredibly complex machine exactly what to do, down to the smallest detail. We're imposing our will, our logic, onto it. That takes confidence. Professionals need to be confident. They take pride in their work. They take bold, calculated risks based on that confidence. They're not supposed to be timid.
Okay, so confident, maybe even a bit arrogant. Where does the humility fit in?
True humility, in this professional context, comes from knowing one thing with absolute certainty. You will fail.
Uh,
You know that eventually your confidence will outstrip your ability, your risk assessment will be wrong, your skills will fall short. You understand that your own supreme arrogance in trying to control the machine will eventually be checked by reality.
mhm.
The system or the requirements or just sheer complexity will humble you.
And that moment when you are humbled,
Mm.
when you make a big mistake and maybe look foolish, that's the test.
That's the true test of professional humility, when the professional finds themselves deservedly the butt of a joke because of a significant error they made. They're the first one to laugh.
They don't get defensive.
No, they accept the ridicule if it's earned. They internalize the lesson from the mistake. And they laugh it off, not dismissively, but with self-awareness. Because they know one mistake, however painful, cannot stop them. They won't let it prevent them from getting back up, learning, and continuing that relentless drive towards improvement, towards that asymptotic zero error rate. That resilience built on knowing you're fallible but still striving. That's the final mark of the professional. #H#outro.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive has really reframed what it means to be a developer. It's so much more than just the technical skills. If we boil it down, what are the big takeaways?
I think there are two huge ones. First, professionalism demands that absolute ownership, that willingness to feel the pain, to metaphorically write that $10,000 check when you mess up. You have to internalize the full cost, financial, structural, psychological of your mistakes.
Ownership, got it. And a second,
Continuous, almost aggressive personal investment. That means embracing something like that 60-hour career plan idea, dedicating serious time, maybe 20 hours a week, purely to self-improvement. Practicing, learning, knowing your field's history, the core concepts like solid design patterns, even old stuff like Parnas tables. It's a conscious choice to be highly capable and just as highly accountable.
so if professionalism boils down to accountability, accountability for function, yes, but maybe even more importantly for structure,
Mhm.
that do no harm to the code mandate, then how we measure success has to change, right? It can't just be about how many features you ship this week.
No, absolutely not. The core measure of a professional success, according to this perspective, isn't feature velocity. It's the ease with which their code can be understood, changed, and maintained by someone else 6 months from now, 6 years from now.
That structural integrity, that cleanliness.
That's the real demonstration of professionalism. It shows you prioritize the long-term health and flexibility of the software over your own short-term convenience or hitting an arbitrary deadline. That ease of change is the ultimate outcome, the ultimate payoff of being that $10,000 professional.
And that ease of change, that structural health, it comes directly from applying all these disciplines we talked about, the automated testing, the Boy Scout rule, the continuous learning. They all work together.
Exactly.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. We've established that your career growth, that's on you. It demands that deliberate investment, that 20-hour window.
And that list of knowledge areas, GOF, solid, methodologies, artifacts, it's big. It can feel intimidating, but you don't have to learn it all tomorrow. You just have to start.
So here's your challenge for this week.
Hmm.
Think back on everything we just discussed. All those principles, terms, artifacts, TDD, solid, maybe tramp data, maybe the Mealy and Moore state machine, whatever stuck out. Pick just one concept from that list that, honestly, you don't fully get yet.
Just one.
Just one. Block out, say, 90 minutes sometime this week. Devote it entirely to that one thing. Start researching it. Read an article, watch a video, maybe try a simple coding key to relate it to it, like the prime factors problem, focusing on that principle. That's your first step, your first small, deliberate act of taking professional responsibility for your own growth. Start writing that $10,000 check of commitment to yourself.